Today I'm going to be going over some viewer questions. I quite often get questions that require fairly lengthy explanations, and it's just not possible to put that into a comment section. So a video like this provides me the opportunity to ramble on basically and introduce video if I have to help make the point and answer that question. It also has a side benefit that other people who may be wondering the same thing but didn't actually ask the question can benefit from the answers. I got a comment recently, kind of a funny one, I guess. Wasn't really a comment, it was just a statement about my video entitled How to Screw Up Your Post Vise. And all it said was, that makes no sense at all. So, seeing as how the video was about the common practice of putting a thrust bearing behind the post vise screw to make it easier to turn. I'm assuming that's what he was referring to. So I'm going to re-explain, my stance on that. The problem with putting a thrust bearing there is that the handle always wants to sit at 6 o'clock, regardless of where you set it up. If it's not under tension, it will just drop back to 6 o'clock, and that may be fine in some instances. But when you're working with hot metal, you want the vice screw to stay where you set it up so that you can come back, bring the bar to the vice, and just give a quarter turn to the vice screw and lock it in position enough so that you can use two hands to tighten it as much as you need to. But when you have a vice screw that can spin very easily, you can't do that. You can set it up at 2 o'clock and it'll drop back down to 6 o'clock, all the time, no matter where you put it. If you're using it horizontally, like at 3 and 9 o'clock, you may get a chance to have it stay there. But in any other position, it will just, by gravity, drop back down to 6 o'clock. So I don't like post vices that have a thrust bearing like that in it. It's what I'm used to. Vice Post vices should be stiff and hard to turn because that makes them useful for forging. One of the comments that I get a lot is my metric conversions. I quite often get people saying, well, we don't have that stock size here. And that may be the case. The descriptions that I give are the stock sizes that I am using. They're available here, and in the US, I think is pretty standard. Other parts of the country might have slightly different standards because they're being measured in metric. But what I'm giving you is by formula the exact size of what I'm using. So you'll have to determine what's the best stock size in your area. The important thing to remember is when I give you the information for the stock size that I'm using, I'm also giving you the volume of the metal that I'm using. So if your stock size is different slightly, you'll be able to calculate to see whether it's the equivalent volume. And if it is, well, you can go ahead and use it, because for the most part, I like forging things where the stock size kind of disappears anyway. So as long as you have the right volume, you'll be able to do the work. Recently, I was asked to measure the curved surfaces on my crosspeen, and this is what I found. On the flat face of the hammer, the two outside edges that are used for fullering are both ground to a 3/8 of an inch radius. Between those two curved edges, I have the center of the hammerhead that is perfectly flat. The crosspeen is very similar, except that the 3/8 radiuses on the outside edge are joined by a 1/2 inch radius in the center. So the entire surface is curved, but there are two different radiuses on the crosspeen. Another comment that I get is, what type of tool steel do I use for the different projects that I do? I use primarily spring steel, coil springs, leaf springs. They're, automotive for the most part. Some are lighter duty springs from different things. It doesn't matter. If it's a spring, I'll pick it up. I'll use it eventually for something. It's all essentially the same steel. It may not technically be the same steel to a metallurgist, but to a blacksmith, it all heat treats the same. You get basically the same results from all of it. Um, so as far as I'm concerned, it's just spring steel, and spring steel is generally referred to as 5160. So yeah, that's what I use for the most part. I do occasionally buy 1095 for special projects, but that's very rare. Up until now, everything that you've seen in any video that I've ever made has been a spring steel uh, bar stock that I've used. And the reason I do that is because it's accessible to everyone. I mean, there are vehicles everywhere in the world, so there are going to be scrap vehicles everywhere in the world, and that means there is going to be an abundance of coil springs and leaf springs. So by demonstrating that you can make and use serviceable tools by using not a great quality steel, that makes projects that I do accessible and possible for everybody. There's no excuses. You can't say, well, I don't have H3 or whatever it is that everyone's using now for punches and chisels. Yeah, you can. You can make it out of spring steel. You may be resharpening more often than you'd like, but it's possible you can get the job done. So, go to work.